Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we have a beautiful person joining us from Australia, Lata Hamilton. Lata, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Vicky. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, we're excited to have you. And I'm going to just keep her talking because I love her accent so much. And I want to thank our audience. We appreciate you being here today. We know we're being listened to in 44 different countries, and that means the world to us. And want to hear from you, what are different topics that you want to hear from us? But today we're going to talk about change and change management. So let me just give you a little context of Lata's background, what she's been up to, and then we'll jump into conversations with her. So I love her bio. She is a pocket rocket, a burst of energy with a big heart and big hair. And I love that. I love big hair. I grew up in the South, Lata. So for me, big hair is like everything. And I've got mine tied up today, so you can't see how big my... So you and I are already going to be soul sisters. She is the founder and CEO of Passion Pioneers and the creator of the Leading Successful Change program. She has worked for some of Australia's biggest companies, and she moved from marketing to the world of organizational change management and has developed her own style in inspiring change leadership. She's worked on changes that have impacted over 100,000 people, global cultural changes and transformations, operating model changes, and digital transformation that is literally changing the way we work. I can't wait to hear more about that. She's also a certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and coach, and she has started her own side hustle in doing so. And I love how you've merged the two. I think that's brilliant. And just to give you a little personal information, she was adopted from India by an Australian family and believes that it doesn't matter where you started, it's where you're going and the lives you change along the way that counts. And I think that's so beautiful. And I absolutely love that because it is important of the impact that we have in the world. So we don't want to waste it, right?
Exactly. We're here for a short time. Let's make the most of it.
Exactly. So let's jump in. Let's talk a little bit about your own journey in leadership and your own transformation. So give us some insight as to how you even moved from, where you were in the marketing and change leadership world into where you are today.
Yeah, I think for me, I was sort of always had leadership on the cards. I kind of realized when I was really young that I was a leader. I didn't ever plan to be one, but like I remember when I was at like primary school, and I just like noticed that my friends would always kind of like look to me as to like where to sit for like lunch. And so one day I ran an experiment with them and I was like, I held myself back like when we were all coming out of the school building. And like I watched them ahead of me, like 10 paces ahead of me, and like they just started to like mingle and kind of like get stuck. They didn't know where to go because they weren't like they didn't have me to look to. And it was just really
Mm.
fascinating. And so from then I think I always sort of just had this sort of concept like I'm a leader even if I don't even if I never planned to be one. And then when I was kind of thinking about my career and things like that, I went into a graduate program really looking for that ability to step up and be a leader. And so did amazing like leadership programs as part of that graduate program, and like leadership courses and things like that. But then when I came out the back of the graduate program, it was like I kind of went into just the regular rhythms and the regular kind of like hierarchy of the organization and still quite in a junior role. And I'm like, hang on a second, where's that leadership that I was promised? And so, it was very much about like do your time and you've kind of got to earn that ability to be like to step up and be a leader. And for me, what I actually ended up finding was I made the move from marketing into change management. And I've had such incredible impact. Like, I've worked on changes that have impacted over 100,000 people, even though I've never had a direct report. So it's almost like you don't necessarily need to be a manager or necessarily have hundreds of people reporting into you to have a positive impact on those people's work and their lives. And that's what I love being able to do. I love being able to showcase like a really different way of leadership, and where leadership really comes from for me is how you show up and how you sort of be that light for other people to look to, and how you be an example, and how you are able to have the confidence to give them the courage to live whatever life and follow whatever path they want to follow.
Wow. Wow. So many things you said there I absolutely love. I mean, first of all, I'm going to go back to when you were talking about being in school, because that little experiment you did is a very powerful experiment for yourself and for your friends, right? Because that really validated for you, okay, like, yeah, they listen to me. I am influencing their behaviors, what they're doing. And, so often we see our kids doing these things naturally, and they don't even realize that those are leadership behaviors or tendencies or attributes. And so good for you for recognizing that at such a young age. And to our audience, I would say to you, pay attention. Who are those natural leaders that, whether it's your kids or your kids' friends, that you're seeing, taking on those tendencies and those roles, because those will be the ones that are influencing the future. So that's one thing. So well done. And then I love what you also just said about you haven't actually had to manage hundreds of people. That what I heard is I didn't have to have a title of a specific role. I naturally have been impacting and influencing others.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
definitely. And it's very rewarding. It's very fulfilling to be able to probably have bigger and broader impact. And then, but then also, as a coach, and with my own students and things like that, I also love that ability to work one-on-one with people, or that ability to have that personal impact on an individual's life. And like those success stories are so meaningful and so powerful. So I think, for managers who have a team, it's like they are your people, right? Like they are the people who are looking to you for guidance and for courage and for confidence, and to help them grow and help them be developed. And I think that those people are the ones that you can really have, very personal impact with. And then
Mhm.
you can have such broad impact if you just shift the way that you think about yourself as a leader. If you
Yeah.
shift from that, like as you mentioned, Vicky, that title, to actually like, who am I as a leader, and what does leadership mean? Because leadership like knows no bounds. The ripple effects that you can have from the way that you show up and the way that you approach anything, including change, can just be like has no bounds. It's just endless.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a way of being, right?
Mm.
It's not something you're doing, it's a way of actually being. And it's such a privileged role to be in, number one, right? Because you do impact and empower a lot of people. It's also a big responsibility, right? Because people are looking at you for that guidance and that inspiration. And so it's a two-way street. So let's talk about change. And let's just go to the most fundamental, from your lens, why do people typically resist change?
It's probably not rocket science, to be honest. It's like we're just simply hardwired psychologically to resist change, and it's a survival technique. It's just simply the fact that when things stay the same, when things are stable, when we've got control over things, and we can plot and plan, like what it is that we want, what the future could look like, our place in the roles that we're in, or the positions that we're in, our ability to kind of have a grasp of what we're doing and to feel good doing it. And so when change comes knocking on our door, which is inevitable, when change comes knocking on our door, it just kind of throws up that real survival anxiety, that fight, flight, freeze response, because suddenly it's like, well, what is that going to mean? Are we like, what am I going to look like? What if I can't change? What if I'm left behind? And
Mm,
humans are social creatures, so we want to make sure that we're socially connected to the people around us. We want to make sure that we're fitting in. We want to make sure that we're going to be included, because that's the way that, as a society, that's the way that we survive. And so it's funny because like even the simplest of changes, like a tiny little process change, for example, in a workplace, you think it's the tiniest little thing, but the psychological processing that's happening for an individual is literally like that deep set survival instinct, despite the fact that you're like, we're literally just moving from doing it on paper to doing it in the system now.
Yeah.
Like literally just like automating this or like digitizing this process. It's just like on the surface it looks really kind of like minimal, but really at a deep rooted layer it can bring up a lot of these beliefs, a lot of these blocks, a lot of these emotions for people. So it's not really rocket science. I think it's just understanding like, yes, people are hardwired to not like change. It's definitely a muscle that we can grow. It's a muscle that we can develop in our people. And we can start to, what I like to call, create like an undercurrent of change acceptance. So every single thing that you do starts getting people warm to the fact that change is inevitable, that you are safe to change, that you'll be supported through change, that you've got a voice, that you can provide feedback, those sorts of things. And sort of getting a little bit excited about the possibility of change. When you create that undercurrent, then those peaks and troughs of actual organizational changes, you know, like if you've ever heard that saying, like a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm not sure who to attribute that to, whoever whoever to credit it to, but like a rising tide lifts all boats. So those peaks and troughs of like major changes are already on a higher foundation of like change acceptance. So it's just understanding that and appreciating and I guess being compassionate for people and also compassionate for yourself, because you're a human too, and you're probably going to have those same reactions. And often as leaders, or as managers, we might be the ones initiating a change. We might be the ones going, look, we need to make a shift in the way that we do things, or we need to bring in this new system, or we need to, you know, change our team structure, or we need to, you know, do XYZ differently. So you might be initiating a change, and you also might be required to cascade a change. So it might be your job to actually digest what's coming from above and then be able to make sense of that for your people and distribute that to your people. And at all times, regardless of whether you're initiating or cascading it, you are also receiving the change itself. You're having to take yourself through that journey too.
Oh, I love how you describe that, because we do forget that part, right? and it is such an important aspect to acknowledge and to validate as to what our own emotions, thoughts, and feelings are as we go through this process. You know, it's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking back, you know, through my career as well. I've always been considered a change agent. and I think about how sometimes things were easier than others, right? And it really is a big part of that is the communication, and to your point, that undercurrent, you know, taking people along with you during the journey instead of just, we're changing, this is what's happening, which sometimes I think that happens, right? Which is also builds that resistance to it. And I think from a societal perspective, we are hardwired to go to the fight, flight, appease, right? Like we're more that way for a survival perspective than actually looking at it from what's the possibilities? What are the benefits? How does this having this change, how does it make it better, easier, more rewarding? All those things that is what the intent is of the change, right? But we kind of resist that part. So what can we do, Lata, to help people embrace and start to have that mindset shift of what are the possibilities? Because yeah, there can be the negatives, and yes, it will affect some people in some way, but what are also those possibilities?
I think one really practical thing that you can do in terms of like building the actual undercurrent of change acceptance. So something that we do in change management, and you know, it's used in project management and agile and things like that, is just a post implementation review. And it's just like literally, like you can do it in so many different ways, but the one that I love is just the simplest. I love keeping things really simple. So it's just like, what worked well, what didn't, what can we do differently next time? And like if you were to just do that with your team on a regular basis, like every quarter, just run a half-hour workshop. It doesn't have to be this big thing. You could even do it like over a lunch or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be this big formal sort of process, but you're starting to get people reflecting on, the good things, reflecting on maybe where are the areas of opportunity, and then also starting to problem solve into the future to go, well, how could we do things differently and what could we do? And again, if you just had a regular practice of that, whether that's like weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even just annually as a team, as a group, it's like you're starting to build that muscle of change acceptance. You're starting to build that undercurrent where people are already ahead of the changes that are coming down the line to them. And then they might have also come up with some great ideas. Like I'm always into like co-creation and co-design. And it's like I always sort of say, like, it's the top down, cascade. So the leader led top down. And then it's also the grassroots bottom up. And then the magic happens in the middle. That's where you get like real follow through, real buy-in, real engagement, is when you actually are able to have that magic meet in the middle. Because leader-led change is really important. You have to show up and be the face and shine as the face of like your change, and be that light for your team and be that guide for your team. At the same time, people need to be empowered and they need to take a level of personal responsibility for their part in the change too. So any opportunities that you have in the change to actually co-create and co-design, so something that I kind of do with like clients, and I teach my students to do this, and projects that I work with, I'll often like work with the leadership team on like a vision. So like I might set, from a coaching perspective, we'll set like an inspirational kind of like change vision, which is for the whole organization or for the whole team as a group. And it's very much like a leader created, because we want that top down. And then what we have then is then we've got the grassroots, we've got like all of the team members, and it's like they're going to change for their reasons, not yours. They're going to change for their reasons, not yours. It is important that they have a North Star of that vision to look to, or elements of that vision to look to, because that's how you get alignment and consistency as a group. So they need to be able to see or have an understanding of what the group vision is, but then also inspiring them or empowering them to actually set their own individual vision, their own individual like vision for their own career, but then also for their life, because they're a holistic individual. And so this is what I call the engagement formula. It's where you get that top down and then that bottom up, and then the magic meets in the middle, because you've got this like beautiful alignment of everybody together, but then you've got that individual and them deciding for their own reasons why they want to change. And so like that's just one example. And then like I would just always say, like, practical, fit for purpose tools, templates, and techniques. Like really, you'll like, this is where the neurolinguistic programming and coaching comes in. It is really about starting to shift how people emotionally feel about the change. And a lot of that doesn't come from the logical reasons why. They are still important. Like the logical reasons why we need to do this change are important. And we also need to build in these real kind of like emotional transformations and shifts and blocks using tools and techniques and templates and activities and exercises to help people emotionally get on board with the change. And that's probably where like the sort of change leadership that I do is a little bit different to traditional sort of change management, which was very much about like, these are, like the business case reasons why we need to do this, and our burning platform for change. Like that stuff is important, but I always say calibrate on hope, not fear. You will need to use fear sometimes, like what happens if we don't change, etc. But if that's all you ever use, people will get burnt out. They will get resentful. Yeah, and they like, that's not the people that you want on the other side of the change. You want people who are energized and vibrant. So I'm like, calibrate on hope. Start to shift how they feel internally and get them to make some new decisions about the change. And that's how we actually end up getting change success.
I love that. Calibrate on hope. That is very powerful. And I think that's, such a winning formula to start to reframe and shift from that fight, flight. And I like how you talked about the emotional aspect of it, because, years ago, traditional leadership was, not being concerned with the emotional aspect of what happens, which is also why people got upset and disgruntled or disengaged. And so that is a very important aspect of recognizing, people's emotions are involved no matter what, right? Because it affects them one way or another. Maybe they're not going to work with the same team that they were working with, or, maybe their leader gets changed or whatever. Like there can be lots of emotions that go on, and they're thinking that. right? And so helping to bring that to the surface, I think, is super important.
Yeah.
So how do you see women holding themselves back when it comes to, really achieving their true potential versus just following along those traditional trodden tracks?
Yeah. So I think, if we're sort of thinking about more traditional change management, it was very planned, it was very structured
Mhm.
because change was slower, projects. So most change is done in projects. And I probably should have already mentioned this, but like if you're listening to us now and you don't know what organizational change management is, it's moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in a new way in an organization. And we do that through communications, training, and business readiness. And it is really about that emotional side and sort of can seem a bit fluffy, but it's actually to realize the business benefits. It's to get the results of the change. So it could be like a new process, a new system, a new team structure, a new operating model, a new product, a new service, a new regulatory or compliance change, or way of working, moving to remote work, for example. So any of that is kind of like what we can support with change management. So obviously, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the pace of change in those areas was slower. There just wasn't as much of it. And so you could have this really, like, projects were kind of more planned and sort of delivered in a very sequential way. So you could have this bouncing ball process for change management. Now, though, change is coming thick and fast. Like, if COVID's taught us anything, it's that you won't get a warning potentially of change coming down the line. The fact that, we're such a globalized world and our industries are changing and competition is changing and regulations and compliance are changing, you can have a lot of change coming to you from external that you didn't choose that. You didn't initiate it. It's coming to you and you're having to react to it. So it's almost like, rather than being reactive and trying to follow a bouncing ball with how you lead your change or how you manage your change, instead, what I really advocate for is practical, fit for purpose change management, where you pick and choose what's going to be of the most value in that moment for that project and for that team. So it's almost like you have this collection of tools, templates, and techniques. And I think that women are really, really good at that because we actually care about the results. Yes,
Mhm.
we, generally, whether socially or, hardwired, kind of think more about people and care a lot about the people side and those relationships and, I guess the kind of like the care that we bring into the workplace. Yes, we have that. And we also care a lot about results. Like, there are a lot of women who I know and who I've worked with who are really high performers. We care about the results. We don't want to focus on people sacrificing results. It's just about the way that we do it. And it's about being more flexible, being more fluid. Sometimes it's like just intuitively tapping into, what do I feel is going to be the right thing right now? And potentially spending a little bit more time sometimes on the relationship stuff or on like the emotional side. And I think for a lot of women, we get pulled into this very kind of like process heavy, like traditional way of thinking about how we approach things. Whereas innately, we have this real ability to flex and to flow, to sort of almost like take notice of what's happening around us and make new decisions along the way and have that real fluidity in what we do. So it's almost amplifying that. It's really like tapping into those skills or those abilities that you do have, and doing it in your way and in your style and carving your own path for it, because we need more leaders who have the confidence to do things differently, because the changes that are coming are not the changes that we've experienced in the past,
Well
and
said.
at the pace that we've experienced in the past.
Yeah, well said. And I think that plays to something you said earlier when you were talking about being agile, right? Like,
Mm.
that's really an example of being agile. Like, and women, the other thing I would just add to what you said, I
Mm.
totally agree with you. I think we also take a broader, longer term view of things
Mhm.
where, sometimes that can be frowned upon because it's, it might be investors pushing to get results faster or whatever, because we are highly results oriented. But it's that harmonizing of those things, right? And really looking at the longer game, not just the immediate payoff, because that immediate payoff can come back and bite us. And I
Mm.
think women are super good at again, just looking at the longer term view and the broader scope of what's actually taking place.
I would totally agree, Vicky. And if you think about like traditional projects, it's like once the thing is delivered, the project closes and
Yeah.
shuts down, and everybody goes and works on new projects or leaves the organization. But if you think about change, change is actually about sustaining that change into the future, embedding it for the future, and making sure that not just at go live or launch or 2 weeks after that we've ticked the box and we're getting the result, but actually that like in 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, we're still getting those same results. And so, sometimes that's why decoupling change management from project management is really, really essential, because it's actually like we are taking a different view. As change managers, we're like exactly what you said, we're taking that long-term view and we're looking at it holistically. So what I like to say is every change that we do builds on the changes before and paves the way for the changes coming down the track. But projects tend to work in like start stop fashion,
Yeah.
whereas I'm like, let's pave the way for the holistic changes that we know are coming. And so like, let's use a bit more like some of the same messaging from this change. It'll be an evolution or the next step in the next change, rather than feeling like a brand new change.
Yeah.
And that's
Starting
how we can
off from the
start to
beginning.
yeah, and that's how we can start to reduce overwhelm and change fatigue, is by actually having things flow together a bit more, having that longer term view, shifting the entire team or the entire organization slowly over time, rather than expecting an overnight transformation.
Yeah, love that. Love that. That's such an important message. And that is applicable in many aspects of our life, right? That doesn't just apply to a corporation implementing a new project or a new way of working or product or whatever the case may be. Those are actually really important to look at for how we live our lives, right? Like what are we learning, and how do we evolve that to the next chapter, the next day, the next, right? Because we are constantly evolving. It's not about getting to the end, the destination. It's about what are you doing on the way? And that's an important message, I think, as human beings. Sometimes we, to your point, is like get to the check mark. We don't always want to get to the check mark, depending on what it is. Yeah. So Lata, what have I not asked you that I should ask you, or that you would want to make sure our audience hears tonight? Or today, I should say today. It's morning for you. It's night for me.
Yeah, it is. We're working across 2 time zones, and I'm in the future.
You are in the future, literally.
I think for me, it's just about like your confidence. It's like, for me, that's really the bedrock of leadership, and it's the bedrock of leading great change. It's, you won't always have all the answers. You won't always know what to do next. You won't always probably show up the way that you want, or potentially communicate as effectively or as eloquently as maybe you hoped you would. Like, you will have emotions, you will have your own resistances, you will have setbacks and challenges, and change comes full of challenge and and setbacks and successes as well. It is tough. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Change is really, really hard. And I think that's why, building your own internal confidence, which I love to describe as like who you are, what you want, what you bring to the table, and what you're worth. Having a really, really strong sense of that means that you can show up and shine. And that's when people will follow you. And it's like, no matter what happens, if you've got that internal level of confidence or that internal level of certainty, it's like, no matter what change comes down the line, no matter what change you're in place to lead, it's like you will have that authenticity and that alignment to lead people that way. So I kind of call myself like a change leadership and confidence expert, because I'm like, I don't think you can have one without the other. And
100%.
if you really want to be like have that positive impact, it's like people are looking for that light in you.
Yeah. And that light is contagious. It is contagious. Oh, I love that. Beautiful conversation. Thank you so, so much for joining us today. I just want to remind our audience that you can find Lata at passionpioneers.com.au. Did I say that right? .com.au?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
And, think about the conversation we've had today about, how you embrace change or how you resist change, and what is the impetus that causes you to resist it, and what attracts you to embracing it. I think those are really important questions to ask ourselves, and the different parts of our life, where do we resist and embrace? Great topic. And organizations definitely have a hard time implementing change. But I think that, to your point earlier, it's happening so fast. We all have to learn how to find the best of it, and how to make it the easiest transitions as possible. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us all the way from Australia. And I want to thank our audience for being here. I hope that you found this conversation very enlightening today. And if you're curious about your own leadership, go onto our website at wilempowered.com. That's 1L, wilempowered.com. And you can take our free leadership quiz, and it'll give you some sense of how you're showing up as a leader, and what areas that you're excelling in and what areas that you might want to focus some energy on. And take into account what Lata said in the beginning, like, do you have those natural leadership tendencies? And you don't have to have a title to be a leader. Love all of that. So thank you so much for joining us, and wishing everyone a wonderful day. And we look forward to seeing you on our next WIL Talk podcast. Take care, everyone.